Today we have someone very special to a lot of us here at TSF. We have Dr. Kaur Maruska. She's an advisor to a lot of the TSF members here at LSU. So I want to welcome Dr. Maruska, and we want to start off by getting to know a little more about what you do here at LSU. So can you tell us a little bit about what your job title is and what your job entails?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for this invitation. This is really fun to get to talk to some of my own students here. So I am an associate professor at LSU in biological sciences. I've been here since 2012. I started and got tenure in, I believe, 2018. So my job, I guess, as an assistant professor an associate professor is I do sort of half research, half teaching, right? So I teach one course every semester, either vertebrate physiology or I do a neuromechanisms of animal behavior course. And then the other half is basically doing research. But those are just two broad categories. There's a lot that goes into each one of those. So, there's mentoring students. I run a research lab and work on cichlid fish, do all kinds of cool stuff. And then there's lots of service things that we have to do, committees and, taking care of students and advising and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a mixed bag, which is what I love about this position. It's always different.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear because I think a lot of us as students, we only get to see the teaching side, or if you do research, the research side, but there's so much more into being a professor that a lot of people don't really get to hear about.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many undergrads have come in to office hours and be like, oh, you're on a research lab? Yeah, you work on fish? That's so cool. They have no idea.
So speaking of the fish, can you tell us a little bit about your research and what the lab studied?
Yeah, so in general, our lab sort of is interested in how the brain controls behaviors broadly, and social behaviors are particularly interesting. So things like aggression, reproduction, parental care, those types of behaviors. And so we're just really interested in how an animal like the fish takes in sensory information through all of their senses, so vision, hearing, smell, and then they use that to make some sort of decision in their brain about what the right behavior is to do in that context, right? So should I go fight this other fish, or should I mate with this fish, or should I take care of my little babies, right? So the brain is just one of those biological frontiers that we still just don't know a lot about what's going on in the brain and how an animal makes decisions, including us, So we do everything from full animal behavior, a lot of behavior recordings, all the way down to molecular mechanisms, so looking at gene transcription and things like that, and then sort of everything in
Physical. Yeah, I know a lot of people wouldn't think that fish are even making decisions about things like parental care or aggression, so it's always really fun to learn about.
Yeah, fish make a lot of the same decisions that we need to make, and we do a lot of work in the lab that does have sort of biomedical implications and things, for example, the species that we work on, as you know, is a mouth brooder, right? And so the females will brood their eggs in their mouth for 2 weeks, and they don't eat during that time, and while they're taking care of little babies. And so understanding how their motivation to either eat or take care of their babies is very, very conflicting, right? And so it has a lot of implications for things like metabolic and eating disorders, even in people, because the fish brain is really well conserved all the way up through to humans. So a lot of the same regions of the brain that they have that are processing the same types of information are also found in the human brain, right? So we can learn some things through studying fish that we just can't do experiments on humans, right? So
Very fun. So what does the day in the life of a professor look like for you?
It depends on the day. But that's what I love about it, is every day is so different, right? So, if I'm teaching, I'll do some class prep and teach. I like to try and get to the lab as much as possible, but as you sort of go on in your career, your time in the lab gets less and less. You all as graduate students spend a lot of time in the lab, but once you become a professor, your research time definitely dwindles, so you have to actively make time to do that. And then there's a lot of other things, like I meet with students every week. We'll talk about research progress. I might be on a committee or a committee meeting I have to go to, returning emails, writing manuscripts or reviewing papers, so it's definitely a mixed bag of things, which makes it super interesting because there's always something different.
Yeah, it sounds like every day is a new day for you.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so what are some of the steps you have to take to become a tenured professor?
There's a lot of different routes to get there. I took a pretty traditional academic route, so I did PhD, then went and did a postdoc, and then applied for faculty positions. But I would say in order to get a faculty position, there's definitely a suite of things that you'll need to do along your career. And you're always sort of setting yourself up for that next step, right? So you need to publish papers, and have interesting research questions that you're going to address for your career, because that's usually what departments are hiring on. They want to see that you're going to be doing something interesting that is fundable, that you can get money from federal agencies to support your research and support your students and everything like that. You have to, once you get a job, you have to be productive, so you have to do research and publish papers. You need to be fairly decent at teaching, so you need to take your teaching seriously and want to educate, and most of us do. We all care about student education, and we want to, foster the next generation of scientists.
Right.
So you need to teach, and then, you need to get funding. That's a big one. In order to get tenure, you definitely have to have gotten some grants. So you need to get good at writing research grants kind of early on in your career. Usually as a graduate student, you start writing small grants, and then you just get better and better at it. And then there's some little service things, but to get tenure, they don't harp too much on the service. It's more getting research done, publications, getting grant money.
Gotcha.
And then another big thing that a lot of people don't think about is just being a good citizen in your department. So whether it's helping the graduate student down the hall from another lab or giving them a chemical they might need to try something, just being supportive of your colleagues, nominating people for awards, things like that is definitely something that will help out in allowing you to stay in your position.
Helps out in the long run.
Yeah, and it's just good to pay it forward. So
so next, so you have 5 graduate students, 1 postdoc, and a host of undergraduate students and projects of your own that you have going on and teaching as well. So how do you balance all of those things, or what are some advice you give on being able to juggle multiple things and once and beginning to do it really well?
Yeah, you learn pretty quickly to juggle a lot of things because there's always things that are going on, and no matter how busy you are, there's always something else that piles on top. And I'm not going to say it's easy, but I would say in general, I'm lucky that I'm naturally an organized person, and so organization is a big key, and lists. I'm a huge proponent of making lists. I have daily lists, I have weekly lists, I have, semester-long lists for sort of broader things. And that really helps me to juggle multiple things. And because there's always times where, if you're writing a grant or something, that takes a large chunk of focused time. Mm-hmm. And you don't always have that. You might have an hour here, an hour there. And so by having a list with other small things on there, I always feel more accomplished because I can do some of those small things in the time that I have and then just cross them off the list, right? And to put off the large focused thinking time to deal with it later. So definitely just planning, organization, making lists for sure. And also just being forgiving of yourself if you don't get things done. Don't stress about it too much because it can easily snowball into oh my God, I never do anything today. Like, here's my whole list. Like, yeah, so yeah, panic attacks. But if you realize that things are going to come up, you're going to have to change your plans for a day or something, it's okay, right? Your list will still be there tomorrow, and you can start working on it again. So, and also I put students to help me with things. So we have weekly meetings, right? And so I always ask you guys things that, what did come up last time, or what were you supposed to do this week? And then once you say it, I'll remember it. But I definitely don't remember everything that's going on all the time.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a little bit difficult, and I think I've definitely learned to kind of make several lists as well, and kind of learn a little bit of that will objective and act for you as well.
Yeah,
that's not very helpful.
Yeah, stating your goals ahead of time and giving yourself personal deadlines too. That's a big one, right? Because if you have a goal to end in deadlines, it's so easy to put those things off. But if you have a deadline, even if you knew that deadline, then at least it gives you something concrete to work over that. Okay, I need to send this to Karen on one day, and so I better do it. That stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think you kind of hinted at this a little bit in your previous answers, but what do you think some of your challenges are now, and how do we kind of face those every day as a professor?
Yeah, I would say one of my biggest personal challenges, and all through my career, is being able to say no. It gets really hard because you want to say yes to doing everything, especially if it's a friend or a colleague or one of your students that asks you to do something, right? You always want to say, yes, absolutely, I'll do that, until you have all these things piled up, and it doesn't work out. So I've gotten better at saying no. So every time I get a request to do something, like give a seminar or whatever it is, be at the committee, I take a little bit more time to evaluate what I can offer to it, what I'm going to get out of it, kind of thing, and just do a little bit better cost-benefit analysis to see whether I shouldn't accept it or not. Because I don't like to do things halfway. If I'm going to commit to doing something, I want to do it well, which means I need to have the time to do it. Correct, right? So I need to figure out how much time things are going to take, and then whether it's worth it, from nothing that's going to benefit, whoever. Just making another class. Sorry. So
makes sense. Yeah. And I think we all kind of can relate to that as well, just trying to balance a bunch of things and making sure we're being involved in the right things that will help us to advance in life. So now we've talked a little bit about what you do here at LSU and your life as a teacher here. So now can we hear a little bit about what you did to get here and to get your position as a professor? When did you know you were interested in science, and what did you do to kind of foster your curiosities?
Yeah, I think I knew pretty early on as a kid. My mom always likes to tell the story of two of my first words were "what dat." I used to say "what dat." So I used to point at things and say "what that," and so they would tell me "what that." And so I definitely naturally had a curiosity as a young child, and I just remember growing up, I loved the ocean, I loved the beach, and so I was one of those kids that would go off and collect little seashells and glue them to a cardboard, and then look up in guidebooks what the names of them were right underneath, So yeah, ever since I was a kid, I knew, I originally wanted to be a marine biologist because I just loved the ocean, I loved fish. I always begged my parents to stop at aquariums whenever we had the chance, so. And I have to say my parents played a huge role in it. They always were willing to do that kind of thing and fostered it, even though they are not scientists at all. Mm-hmm. And they still have a hard time understanding what I do. But they were always like, yes, we'll stop the aquarium if you want to go, So that was a huge part of it. And then once I got to college and, started taking all the science classes as you do after your first year or two, mm-hmm. I definitely was hooked. And then I went to go work in a lab. Probably, I think it was my junior year, I got into a lab, 2 labs actually. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely understand having the parents' help as well, along the way in anything, and them helping you to continue your interest in science and as well. I know you just mentioned at your first research experience, so as engaging media, do you remember like what you did?
Yeah, I worked in 2 different labs. One was working on, it was an endocrinology lab, so they were studying hormones in lampreys. So lamprey, a very primitive fish that are basically parasites. They suck onto other fish.
Like,
And one of the first things I remember from being an undergrad is I just started in the lab, and they're like, "Oh, it's lamprey season. We need to go out collect some lampreys to bring back into the lab." And so this was in New Hampshire. I went to University of New Hampshire, my bachelor's degree, and they took me out to this, river, and they have fish ladders there, which are structures they build to help fish like salmon, for example, and lampreys that are migrating from the ocean upstreams to spawn. And there's often areas of the river where there is either a dam so the fish can't get up, or a big waterfall or something. So they build these fish ladders so that the fish can get help swimming up to their spawning areas. And so we went to one of these fish ladders, and they have this big like concrete opening where you can go down into it in the water. And just kind of see what's going on with the fish ladder, right? So they told me like, this is where we collect the lampreys, and so I'm looking in this thing, and the water is murky. You can't see a thing in there, right? And they give me these like chest waders to put on, and they're like, okay, you're going down first. So I had to climb down this dark hole, like standing in water, like up to here. And all of a sudden, these things are like hitting my legs. I'm like, what is that? Then they handed this net, and they're like, just scrape it along the wall. I was like, okay. Scraped it along the wall, and this net full of like swirling lampreys comes out, and I was both like fascinated and disgusted at the same time. And my advisor, who was a woman, I was working with her lab, and she's just laughing, like, she's like, this is your induction into the lab. Everyone's got to go out lamprey fishing. So, but then we did lots of lab stuff. Like I got to learn some histology, so sectioning of brains and gonads and things like that, and chemical, like HPLC type analyses, looking at different hormones that we would isolate from the pituitary gland. And then the other lab I worked in for a little while was a lobster lab. So, so that was kind of cool. They were looking at how lobsters were surviving in estuary, so they kind of wanted to see how much fresh water they could tolerate. And so I remember having to draw the hemolymph from like the leg of a lobster every few hours as they were exposed to different salinities, and that we measure the osmolarity of the oil.
That's really cool. But that is fun, especially the wet lab. I mean the fieldwork experience.
I don't do field work anymore, but I did do it, through my, undergraduate and graduate school too. So
That sounds pretty cool. So do you have any funny stories from any part of your academic career prior to LSE?
Yeah, that. I don't know. Funny? Yes, but I don't want to incriminate myself too much.
Okay.
A lot of, a little debauchery and drunkenness, but so I'll stay away from those. But I do have one funny story that when I was collecting fish in Hawaii. So in Hawaii, I worked on a damselfish species, and so to collect these fish for experiments, I worked on an island. It was Coconut Island, the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology on Oahu. And I would go down to one of the docks on the island and throw in a fishing line to catch my fish, and then walk it up to the lab. And one day I was out there fishing, and there's a lot of other fish in there that I didn't want to catch. So you had to be very strategic with your fishing. Like you would just put the bait right on top of the water, and when the damselfish come up, as soon as they go to bite it, you kind of had to yank your pole to hook it, and then you also had to yank it away from other fish that were trying to bite it, right? So one day I was out there fishing, and I was standing on a dock that was probably, it's probably from me to you, so like 4 feet, 5 feet or so in this wide dock, and I had hooked a small damselfish. And I yanked the pole so hard that the fish sort of flew up and over my head. And as it was doing that, the hook fell out of the mouth. So the fish just flew over my head. On the other side of me was a shark haunt. So it's where the island kept some of their sharks that they would show to tourists and school groups and things. And I turned around and that fish was gone. Like the sharks all swarmed over me.
They didn't have a chance.
And then I looked over and a tour group had just showed up. And so they saw this entire thing and there was two little kids, probably like 7 years old or so. Their mouths just like hung open because they're like, oh my God. So I had to keep fishing because that fish was gone.
Yes, it kind of sounded like a scene from a cartoon.
Yeah, it was great. It was funny and embarrassing with the tour guide and like horrified. She didn't know what to say.
All right. So we'll transition into the last segment of the interview now, where we're just going to give you some quick rapid fire questions. So first, are fish your favorite animal? And if not, what is? And if so, what species?
I definitely like fish a lot, but favorite animal, I'm going to try to have a favorite animal. I have a lot of favorite animals. So like fish, there's a lot of cool fish species, there's 30,000 of them, so it's a lot to choose from. But, like I like molas, the ocean sunfish, just because they're goofy and big. And I really like sharks and stingrays. And I did some of my graduate work on those fish. And then in general, I really like cats. Because they're furry, and so I have a couple of cats, but I like tigers and lions. And then one of my favorite animals too is the meerkat. Meerkats are super cool and interesting behaviorally, and they have sentries and that watch out for and alarm calls and differ based on what kind of predators are around. So it's pretty amazing. So
A lot of cooperative behavior.
yeah. So I have a lot of favorite animals, I would say. So.
What's your favorite?
Favorite food. I also have a lot of favorite. I really like Mexican food. I would say that's probably one of my favorites. I like spicy things and I like Mexican food. So.
Man, spicy definitely goes well with Louisiana.
Yes, it does. And Louisiana has a lot of great food too. You can't eat it all the time.
Yeah.
So.
What's your happy pool?
My happy person. I would say anywhere outside. Yeah, especially like the beach and the ocean. Like I love sitting on a beach and just listening to the waves and smelling the salt air and all that. But right now, like the pandemic, my happy place has just really been my backyard. I'll go out on my deck and do some reading or whatever, just being around the birds and
Some peace and quiet.
yeah.
And do you think you're more of a morning or night? Because
That's easy morning. I'm in bed by like 9:30.
all right. And then last question: what's your favorite hobby or your favorite way to spend your free time?
Yeah, again, there I have a lot of hobbies. I like reading a lot. I like doing art stuff too, so drawing and painting. I recently started making little crochet animals. I'm learning crochet, which is a lot harder than I thought. Yeah, and then just going for walks, things like that. Like I like to balance what I do, so I don't have one thing that I go to all the time. It kind of depends on my mood, and so I like to have a lot of options. Even things like watching movies or sports. I like watching sports things too. So
That's all right. Well, thank you for participating in this interview and answering all of our questions. And we definitely enjoyed getting to know a little more about you and your work here at LSU. So thank you for watching.